the moment you begin to feel that your selfishness extends to everyone being happy, right? Because you actually care about everyone, right? And you feel better when you see people smiling rather than, weeping. If you extend the circle of your self-concern to everyone, well then, that's not normal selfishness. That's sainthood in a.
If I'm doing it because I feel good when people smile, that doesn't mean I necessarily care about them. It means I might care about that good feeling that I get.
Yeah, except it's the I get part is vulnerable to inspection. I mean, the sense that there's an I who's appropriating that in every moment it's a project which can be accomplished in a moment, or you can fail to accomplish it after many years of looking. But there's the sense that there is it's useful to define what we mean by self, because most people don't feel identical to their bodies. So when I say the self doesn't exist, I'm not saying that people don't exist. I'm not saying that nobody's here and this is all an illusion. But there are contemplative and religious and spiritual traditions that can sound like they're saying something very much like that. But I'm saying that the sense that we all have of being a subject in the head, riding around in the body as though it were a kind of vehicle, right? Because this really is most people's starting point. They don't feel truly coterminous with their bodies. They feel like they're in their head and that their hands are down there in some sense. And that sense of being a subject in the head is vulnerable to inspection. You can lose that sense. And on one level, you can just be identified with your body. I mean, that is actually progress in this, in this course of self examination, because simply to feel like a body in the world is different from the way most people feel. Most people are kind of, and this is what we're running into. Most people are common sense dualists. They feel like the mind can't possibly be identical to the brain. The mind is something altogether different, and it just feels like it's in the head as there's a sort of locus of attention that's emanating from the head. But this body is a machine that can malfunction, and it's changing over time. It's clearly not what I am, and I am probably a soul then. I'm probably spirit. I can probably drift off the brain at death, and that sense is, I think, and all the ways in which that sense can be played with by fasting or prayer or meditation or psychedelics or getting crazy ideas that you find emotionally very animating. The sort of adventures you can have in dualism are part of the problem here, because
Adventures in Dualism should be the title of your next book.
Right. Yeah.
I didn't know if you want to jump in on that at all.
I have nothing to contribute. No.
Yeah. I sit here and I listen to this, and I think there's like a 4-hour fascinating for me conversation. You might not think so much, because I have no problem with the idea that the mind is the brain, but I know that there are people who do.
But it doesn't feel that way.
I know it doesn't feel that way, and I don't know that it's necessary, and I don't know what the right path is. I don't know that for example, losing this sense of self could be a great thing.
Well, one thing I would add is that you lose it all the time because it actually isn't there. I mean, you are losing it all the time.
How can you lose something that's not there?
Because because it always seems there retrospectively, but when you're really paying attention to something, when you're so-called lost in your work, or you're lost in some athletic task, or you're just lost in thought. Like you're thinking about something and you're not aware that you're thinking. That we're constant. This sense of our own kind of central presence in our heads is constantly being undercut by attention being diverted to something out in the world or to some experience, and you can become increasingly sensitive to how it's being interrupted.
I would love to get to the truth, and I love the fact we're on the pursuit, but irrespective of what the truth is, Richard, something like consciousness, which we still Some would say we understand, and some would say we don't. I think we don't. But what would be the evolutionary advantage in the process by which we get to consciousness as we have it, as we seem to have it, that might distinguish us from other animals?
It's a big mystery, because you could build an animal which did all the sophisticated things animals have to do, hunting for food, avoiding predators, looking for mates, doing everything that an animal has to do in order to survive and propagate its genes. And I don't think it would have to be conscious at all. I think it could all be done in the way that a computer would do it. I mean, when you talk to Siri or Alexa, they sound conscious, but you know they're not. And for an animal to survive with a nervous system, it doesn't, it seems to me, need to be conscious. And I'm very glad I'm conscious, and I'm pretty sure you are as well. I mean, I think other people. I'm not a solipsist, but I do find it a bit of a mystery why we have consciousness at all.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think it's, as I wrote somewhere, it's the one thing in this universe that can't be an illusion, including the universe. I mean, this universe could be a simulation on some alien hard drive.
I think Descartes said something similar.
Yeah. Although I got 40 emails last week that says we've proved that that's not true, and I don't necessarily buy those emails either.
Yes, that's exactly what the simulators would say if you were. But I mean, consciousness as just the felt sense that something is going on, the fact that there's an experiential quality, whatever this is, whether you're a brain in a vat, whether you're in the matrix, whether consciousness is being produced by information processing in your head, as seems reasonable to believe. Consciousness is always the first fact before any other facts can be discussed. And it's also the most important thing in the universe. It's the only thing that makes, at least in my view, it's the only thing that makes the universe important. The fact that the lights are on, the fact that it's possible for the lights to be on. If we knew that this universe, if you told me there's a universe somewhere that's got stars and planets, but it's got the constants of nature are tuned just a little awry so that conscious life is impossible, that is a deeply uninteresting universe, and consciousness is the only ground for any moral dimension to our lives too. And yet, I'm with you in feeling that it's not clear that it does anything, and it's not clear that it would be. It's not clear how it would be selected for, because I mean, if you just look at your own experience, everything that you're conscious of, anything that you seem to be consciously deciding, or any place where it seems that consciousness is necessary to integrate information behaviorally, to have a complex goal, say for someone to say to you, well, you should really get to the Orpheum Theater at 8 o'clock to hear this talk, for that to become a behavioral plan, let's just say that is in fact something that can only be done consciously in apes like ourselves. Still, it's not clear why, well, as you said, it's not clear that should be the only way that it gets accomplished, and we could easily build robots, one presumes, that could do these things without it being something that it's like to be those robots. But even in our own case, if consciousness really is just what it is at the level of our neurophysiology, it's only effective in virtue of what it is at the level of neurophysiology. So the fact that there's a subjective side to it doesn't matter. I mean, the fact that you're having this experience now, which again is the most important thing in anyone's life, the experience side of it is not what is actually behaviorally effective if in fact consciousness has the other face, which is its neurophysiology and its information processing dynamics.
Nicholas Humphrey suggested that one of the most important things we have to do is to second guess other people. We swim through a sea of a social sea. We have to make our way through very, very complicated relationships with other people. and we have to second guess what they're going to do. All the time we're having to predict how this other person is going to react. And so he postulates what he calls the inner eye, which is looking inwards to yourself as an aid to second guessing what the other person might do. You need this extra sense organ to help you to predict the behavior of the other person. I still don't think that that does it.
Somehow I wouldn't have been as surprised by the last presidential election if I was doing that correctly.
Yeah, and I was here before the election and predicted that there was no way Trump could win. And as somebody who occasionally pretends to read minds and make predictions for a living, boy, was that a mistake. I think what Richard's talking about is something that I've heard elsewhere is the intentional stance. What if it's the case that consciousness, which gives rise to this sense of self, in a way that goes beyond mere self-reflection and consideration, leads us to connections with other people? And this is what provides the evolutionary benefit. But it also leads to something else that I thought we'd talk about, which is tribalism. Our lives as individuals become merged, obviously, with our family. We have this immediate connection to our family, and then we extend this, and we extend the definition of family, and we begin to form tribes. And there was a time and a place where that may have been the best thing. Is it the case that, I mean, obviously these could all be side effects of just what happened, and I would think that I'd be okay with the idea that consciousness and tribalism and everything are side effects of what happened. You know, it doesn't have to be a guiding hand. But in the process, viewing it from natural selection, what were the benefits of tribalism, and have we actually outgrown them, or are we maybe taking a step back?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Richard, I think altruism, the evolutionary rationale for altruism really only makes sense in a tribal context. So that like one of the silver linings of internecine tribal conflict was that in-group altruism got selected for. I don't know if there's any recent work on that, but that was my reading of things some decades ago.
Yes.
Now, that's not to say that we're stuck with tribalism as the only rationale for altruism, but in terms of how apes like ourselves became as altruistic as we are, it's thought that competition among tribes was the basis.
Well, I
for that.
suppose a Darwinian view of altruism would go back to a time when we lived in small tribal groups, and there were two things about living in these small groups. One was that you were completely surrounded by kin, cousins, second cousins, siblings, nephews and nieces, and so on. And so there would have been a Darwinian incentive to altruism towards anybody you meet, because anybody you meet is a member of your own village, your own tribe, your own clan. And the second thing, the other Darwinian engine, motor of altruism is reciprocation. And reciprocation depends, or largely depends, upon encountering the same individual again and again.
Yeah.
And that again happens within the village, within the band, within the tribe. So there would have been a selection pressure in favor of within-group altruism and out-group hostility, xenophobia. So we can expect that there should be this tendency to despise the out-group and to be altruistic and cooperative with the familiar in-group. And that could be defined as people you've known all your life, people you were brought up with, people who look like you. There are all sorts of ways in which the rule of thumb for how to behave could have latched on. And it's a pretty depressing outlook when we've moved out of our tribal past and moved into big cities where we're no longer in small tribal groups. But we still have the same rules of thumb which work, and that is a good thing. We have a rule of thumb that says just, in general, be nice to anybody, empathize with anybody, because in the distant past, anybody would have been defined as your own tribe, your own your own clan, your own kin group, your own reciprocation group.
So I wonder if it's to our benefit to, there's a couple of potential ways to go there. One is to get everybody to realize that everybody still is part of our clan, that we are one human clan. I don't know, I don't have the magic solution to end the various divisions, but the others, maybe to get people to recognize that they can be a part of a number of different clans that overlap. This is how we build societies.
Right.
You know, I care more about my immediate family than I do my neighborhood, but I care more about my neighborhood than I do, you know, the broader world. But I can't diminish my caring for things outside my scope to zero, because we know that we have an impact on each other, even at great distances.
Peter Singer wrote a book called The Expanding Circle, in which he starts out by talking about this in-group, kin group, and then talks about the altruism broadening itself out to wider and wider and wider groups. And he would like that to include non-human animals as well, that psychologically we can extend our tribal loyalty to all sentient beings.
Yeah.
There were some folks out front with pictures of both of you actually lobbying for something along those lines.
Oh yeah.
Which was nice.
No, I think Singer's heuristic is the right one. That moral progress is generally synonymous with expanding the circle of moral concern to not just your family, not just your society, not just your race, not just your nation, but just, you know, outward, and to the point where ultimately you're concerned about the suffering of conscious creatures insofar as they can suffer. So it's not just humans, and it's if we discovered that pigs suffered much more than cows, well, then it would be appropriate to be more concerned about pigs than cows, and it's just that we actually care about the experience of conscious systems.